got into filmmaking is that went to art school. And I knew when I started at art school that I wanted to work in video. This was the mid-'80s, and video as an art medium was still burgeoning. Certainly people had been doing it for a while, but it wasn't, it was still a newer art medium at the time. And what I appreciated about doing video at the time was that it had a political purpose. Whether it was playful or whether it was about specific kind of issues, there was a way in which I saw artists either telling their stories or other stories or playing with the medium, questioning the medium, and all of it I saw as a kind of work that had political purpose or political intent, and that attracted me, I think. So yeah, art school. Palestine Trilogy, which is referenced on the Cinema Politica website, is a compilation of 3 videos. Each of them deals with issues of dispossession of Palestinian land, whether it's historical or contemporary. And each one has a very different kind of approach in terms of the formal approach. All of them really use the documentation as the source, but each has a very different kind of approach to the way in which the story is told. The first piece is titled Deir Yassin Remembered. The second is Even in the Desert. And the last one, which is a more poetic piece, is called A Hot Sand-Filled Wind. With Deir Yassin Remembered, that piece is probably the closest to what I would call a conventional documentary. And it addresses the massacre that happened in 1948, a massacre of Palestinians by Jews who lived in Palestine at the time, Jews who were fighting to try and establish the state of Israel. And it was really at the moment that we now call the Nakba, in which Palestinians were driven out of their villages, some were massacred, a lot of land taken, and it really is the beginning of what we now call the occupation, and with different kind of stages along the way. One of the main reasons to address Palestine to address the Deir Yassin and the massacre at Deir Yassin is that it really challenges the historical record, and what I learned growing up and what many others have learned, which was a kind of obfuscation of that historical moment. Many of us Jews and people around the world have been told that Palestinians ran away and that they abandoned their land. But frankly, that wasn't true. In fact, there were massacres that happened at the time. There was a military agenda to drive Palestinians away. And so this piece, which was it documents one of the largest massacres of that time, has resonance to this day. So that's the first one. The second one, Even in the Desert, is much more of a kind of compilation of different moments in the West Bank that look at the occupation and what the contemporary repercussions are, what people are living with on the land every day, and the way that their travel is determined, the way that they live, their houses are demolished. That so much of what happens is a result of a very oppressive and a system that actually defies international law. So this, Even in the Desert, follows a few places in the West Bank and what's going on. And A Hot Sand-Filled Wind, which is the third piece, is a totally different kind of piece. It draws on some of the same kind of image sources, that is, documentary images, but it is a kind of poetic attempt to address a hope, a desire that this doesn't have to be the way it is. It's based on a poem by Nadia Habib, in which she thinks about the sound of peace and what does it sound like and might it look like. And so that was at a hopeful moment, done in a much more hopeful moment. I think it's really been hard to sustain hope given what's been going on, the continued deterioration in the West Bank and Gaza, and how Israel has defied international law, the calls for either a Palestinian state or one state solution, but basically for a much more for an acknowledgement of Palestinian land, and so it's been difficult to maintain that hope. I don't know even how I would look at that piece again at this moment in time, 10 years later, almost, not quite, but almost 10 years later. But I think it still addresses a desire and the capacity to view something differently than what it is. The reason for three pieces as opposed to one long one is so that it could be a useful tool, both for activism and education. I guess the question is what's my motivation for doing the work that I do? I think it's a multiple kind of way that one enters work often, but I really take the feminist adage that the personal is political, and that has been something that's central to all of the work I do, whether it's around environmental issues or family issues or Israel-Palestine. And so I think, many artists come at their work from a personal perspective first, and certainly in terms of Palestine Trilogy, which is the piece that's on the Cinema Politica website, it had very significant personal implications for me because I needed to locate myself in this kind of vast history of Israel-Palestine, partly because I was born there, and then thinking about what are the kind of ways in which we help in perpetuating an unfair system. And so and the first part of that is to educate ourselves. So as much as that I've been doing a few other works before that around Palestine, this was part of a number of works that deal with the politics of that area. And the desire is to have some kind of political imperative, to actually either use the work to educate other people and let them know about what's going on in the area as a way to have discussion about the issues that are there. And documentary really seems to be a big part of that. It's a way in which you can put yourself in a space on the ground and be a witness. I think the intersection of art and politics is vital, and it always has been there. We like to sometimes think about art as something that is apolitical, that it's very personal, or it's formal, or it has its own reason for being or its own venues. But in so many ways, art is political, sometimes overtly so and sometimes not so overtly, even in the ways that art might challenge different people to see differently. That is a political kind of purpose or intent or function of art. The kind of work that I've been doing is probably much more overt, certainly with Palestine Trilogy. It's much more work that is deliberately putting out images that are intended to have people confront what's going on in Israel-Palestine in a very much more direct kind of way, rather than just hearing it incidentally. Then when you see it, you see what's happening, or you understand that there are repercussions to these historical moments that people live with now, that kind of thing. So there are very many, it has a much more, as I mentioned before, an activist intent. but the range of possibilities for art and political work, whether it's much more social justice oriented, whether it's about challenging issues of representation, whether it's about promoting different ways of thinking, certainly around environmental issues, that's a really important one, or even having a philosophical discussion. All of that can come together, and art is actually an amazing interdisciplinary kind of field, because it can incorporate any number of other disciplines, and then have a way, artists can then create a discourse with other fields, with other challenging precepts or specific points of view. It's a really great place to do work. The current project that I'm working on is quite different than the other work I've just been talking about. It has a much more autobiographical significance, or even more personal than the other work. And it's dealing with a family narrative, basically. So the title of it is Lessons for Polygamists, and it's taking the perspective of a young girl who lives in a polygamous family, and what she would want to tell her father, her dad. So it's kind of, and it's kind of a lot around, like, basically how to behave in a certain kind of way. But it addresses some of the little stories from the family as well. So it's very personal for me. It's a total challenge because I'm moving away from documentary in doing that. It's going to involve more animation and compositing, and certainly sourcing some documents, as it were, but creating a different kind of field of vision in terms of the frame of the work. And it certainly has political purposes as well. So much as I spoke about the other work, I think I see it as a work that has this kind of intersection of personal and political, but it draws on a much more personal narrative. And also it's drawing on skills that I haven't done, things that I haven't done before. So I'm really kind of, I think, challenged to think through how to work with this piece through a bit more. I would say it's much more of an experimental piece. But yeah, I'm excited by it, but I'm also scared by it. So yeah. Distribution needs so much more work on so many levels, because I think it's hard for people to access independent work. It's hard to access artists' works, and even though we have this kind of burgeoning field of documentary, where we have a documentary channel, here in Toronto there's a whole theater dedicated to documentary, it's still difficult for people to access short documentaries or documentaries produced by artists, documentaries that are much more independent or small budget. So there does need to be a way in which regular consumers could have that, could access that at the same time that the artists have some kind of remuneration for their work. The question is, what do I think of the work that Cinema Politica is doing? And I have to, self-disclose, because I've been on their advisory, and I wouldn't be there if I didn't totally think that they are doing amazing work. I think, first of all, to have started at a university and then to have grown in such a way that there are chapters all over Canada and all over the world, and to see that there is an audience, and that the work then, it's not just about documentary, but it's about political documentary, and it's about work that is showing work that really challenges all of our worldviews and our perspectives and challenges us to act and to think about the ways of that people are impacted by abuses of power, or in the ways that justice needs to be sought, or the kind of issues of representation that are important to us. All of these kinds of ways that we can consider, these issues Cinema Politica has been doing. And so I think the work is incredibly important. I hope that it continues to grow. I think the model of wherein Cinema Politica accesses all kinds of work and then curates and provides possible, works to people who don't have the time to always do all of that kind of looking and research is hopefully helpful. I think it would be a good model in terms of the kind of, and I certainly trust the programmers because the works that I've seen, I go pretty regularly to the screenings here at the Bloor in Toronto, and I can't say that I have any memory of coming out of a film and going, oh, that was a dud or something. All the films that I've seen have been really worthwhile, really challenging, and I always feel like I want more and more people to see the work. So I think cinema, it's a great idea. It's been working really well. I hope it continues. I hope it becomes a way, it has a good sustainable kind of trajectory that so that it can be funded and have programmers that can be funded, and I think that's the probably the next place that it needs some, that kind of injection of support and cash, because it's a really great way to show political documentary.